speaking of another of our neighbors, which is usually in the headlines a lot, but if you look at least the last few months, Pakistan has relatively not made a lot of global headlines. I mean, it has made headlines mostly for internal reasons. So I want to understand, is Pakistan sort of finally under pressure because of either domestic, turmoil, political turmoil, or domestic economic weakness, or are there even some external factors like the FATF? What's going on in Pakistan?
Um, to be fair, I would say that I don't think Pakistan has found itself so isolated before. It had many cards to play, but remember now that Biden and Kamala have won, the Islamist lobby in America is so strong they might still get another life. But for them to lose all their allies overnight, Mahathir Mohamad is gone, and the new Malaysian government doesn't want to have much to do with Pakistan because they don't want to go down that same suicidal path of Mahathir Mohamad. Uh, Saudi Arabia now detests them. The UAE, my Pakistani friends in the UAE are telling me that life has become impossibly difficult for them. You know, the way when Yasser Arafat supported Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait, the Gulf countries made the lives of Palestinians in the Gulf miserable. It wasn't outright expulsion, though Kuwait did expel them when it got independent. But it wasn't outright expulsion. It was just slow day-to-day harassment, where if you're Palestinian, you are considered somebody dirty, not to be trusted, treated like shit. That is now happening to Pakistanis across the Gulf. It is happening in Saudi Arabia. It is happening in the UAE. You've seen how they cancelled Pakistani doctors' licenses. Then they cancelled Pakistani pilots' licenses. They no longer want Pakistani pilots to fly, Etihad and Emirates and Gulf Air, were essentially PIA minus. They were all started by PIA in the sense, Pakistan International Airlines. Today, they don't even want to employ a Pakistani there, except in menial labor jobs and things. And even that they're trying to get rid of now. So they've lost the entire goodwill that they had in the Gulf. And Pakistan should have seen this. Pakistan should have seen this because the reason they used to use Pakistani troops to guard their royalty and things like that was that Pakistan was seen as a relatively secular Muslim state, as opposed to unreliable local tribes people. For example, King Faisal, who was killed by his own nephew or something like that in retaliation for what happened to his uncle in the Mecca siege, in the siege of the Holy Mosque. So Pakistani troops were seen as reliable. Their air forces were run by the Pakistanis because they were seen as competent. Today, Pakistan is seen as a hub of terrorism. People, the effect of the assassination of Salman Taseer or Benazir Bhutto, Pakistanis didn't realize this. The Pakistan army thought it was being very smart getting rid of Benazir Bhutto. They never realized how this was going to come to roost to them because the Saudis and co lost confidence in them. They're like, look, if these guys are playing hopscotch with their own leaders, tomorrow what will they do to us? So that mistrust has been building. The final thing came with the Saudis, at least with Mohammed bin Salman. The final thing came when they bought these CSS-2 intermediate range missiles from Beijing in uh, the 1990s, I think, the Saudis. And the belief was that Pakistan would give them warheads on demand, that the Pakistani nuclear arsenal was in fact a Saudi on demand nuclear arsenal. NPT uh, benefits without, the benefits of having nuclear weapons with NPT membership kind of benefits club, if you want to call it that. And the Pakistanis went because every time Pakistan is asked to deliver on its promises, it never does. Remember, the game they played with the Americans in Afghanistan is also what they've played with the Saudis in Yemen. When the Saudis asked them for troop deployments, they said flat out no. So that's also not gone down very well with MBS. The UAE knew. The Saudis did not know how to fight. The UAE knows how to fight. They knew it was going to get long, bloody, and miserable because I spoke to a lot of UAE army officers and air force officers before they went in. But they're like, look, an alliance is an alliance. If we're going in, we're going in. Are many of our kids going to die? Yes. That's the price we have to pay. And they were very clear-headed about it, and in that sense, you see this, that Sheikh Nahyan has been the mentor of MBS for quite some time now. It's his wisdom that he allows MBS to front all the policies, but it's Sheikh Nahyan in that sense driving it. He'll never take credit for it because he's a smart man. So it's actually, it proves something I thought 5-10 years back wrong. I fundamentally believed that you could not move from a pre-industrial society to the information age. And I think the UAE has proven us wrong, because the UAE never moved into manufacturing per se, but they've still managed to move into the information age and become a very open, liberal society. And I think that is what they are now trying to replicate for Saudi Arabia. So UAE was the pilot project, Saudi Arabia is the main project. I think it will succeed. I think it will succeed. So I hope it will succeed. Maybe it's wishful thinking, but that is the trajectory. I think the big loser in all of this are Turkey and Iran.
Right. And, talking about Pakistan, while it has certainly lost out on a lot of support globally, and the other things that you've mentioned, there's one thing that, has been in the news recently, and that is there are dissidents from Pakistan, I mean, Balochistan, to be particular. I mean, we've seen what happened with Karima Baloch in Canada. There was a journalist in Sweden who was killed. And I think in just a few days ago, we've seen, I think there was a human rights activist, Rahat Austin, who was attacked by some Islamists. Now, of course, Islamists are out there in every country, but do you think Pakistan has that kind of covert capabilities to actually target, some of these very specific individuals?
Yes and no. They've got enough crazies to go after specific individuals.
Right.
They've also got enough social support to see to it that the host countries don't investigate properly. So, for example, you remember the Kanishka investigation, how badly Canada botched it up, because Khalistanis were too important a vote bank for them to investigate that bombing properly. And that's what we've seen again. In Sweden, they form quite an important vote bank as well. So you're seeing that in Sweden as well, that they're not really going to investigate things and this is where Pakistan has succeeded, where India has failed. Pakistan manages to weaponize its communities abroad, whereas India manages to weaponize its communities abroad against itself. Because the loudest, shrillest voices you hear against India are NRIs. So there is that. But when we say it's the end of the road for Pakistan, sorry to bring it back to FATF, I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. The Pakistani feudal elite who control society, that is the so-called industrialists, the so-called military, and the so-called landowners, they're all the same families. They pretend to be different categories. They're all the same families intermarried into each other. The father will be a sugar farmer. The daughter will be the wife of the chief of army staff. The son-in-law will be a landowner or something like that. So they all have dual citizenship. And they treat Pakistan as that sort of the same way we got rid of the Zamindari system. They treat it as the absentee landlord who wants to milk it for everything it's worth, but they're not interested in growing it for what it's worth. So as long as they continue to have their dual citizenships in wherever, and there's a huge number of them in Boston, we know that Norway is swamped by them. Half of Mayfair is owned by Pakistanis in London. Dubai, again, lots of the Pakistani elite families live there. Zardari lives there full time. His children live there full time. When people make fun of Rahul Gandhi, I'm like, at least Rahul Gandhi is still better than the Zardari, the Bhuttos, and what they do. Or the Nawaz Sharifs also. They hardly spend any time in Pakistan proper. Army generals, none of their families are in Pakistan proper. They all live abroad. They all have dual citizenship. So what you're going to see is that even if Pakistan fails, Pakistan is going to go on, because the pain of the Pakistani people is not what determines Pakistani policy. It is the pain of the Pakistani elite that determines policy. And how are these countries going to crack down? How is the UAE going to crack down on one of its highest disposable income groups? How is America going to crack down on its own citizens just because they have a dual passport without getting rid of the entire dual passport this thing? How is Britain going to do that, especially when Britain is one of the biggest stashing points of ill-gotten gains from Pakistan? So the elite will never feel pressured. So FATF sanctions, all of that, it's just an eyewash. It's a joke. You're hitting the wrong target. It's like going to the doctor saying, doctor, mere ko pili hai, I have jaundice. And the doctor, instead of putting you on treatment for your liver because it's a liver disease, he says, you're looking very yellow. You can choose either between Yves Saint Laurent Foundation or Christian Dior Foundation to apply on your face so that the yellowness goes. It's like that.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Chitti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.